do not so much learn anything as experience certain emotions and are thrown into a special state of mind, unquote. Well, what was this special state of mind? Folks, it was a plasticity in order that the conditioning might take permanent root. The psychologist William Sargent, the greatest authority on this subject, says in his classic Battle for the Mind, quote, "It seems, therefore, that there are common final paths which all individual animals, though initial temperamental responses to imposed stresses vary greatly, must finally take. If only stresses are continued long enough, this is probably the same in human beings, and if so, may help to explain why excitatory drumming, dancing, and continued bodily movement are so much used in such a number of primitive religious groups. The efforts and excitement of keeping the dance in progress for many hours on end should wear down, and if need be, finally subdue even the strongest and most stubborn temperament, such as might be able to survive frightening and exciting talk alone for days or weeks," unquote. Now, understanding what I just read to you, this quote from Battle for the Mind by William Sargent, can you still say that music plays no part in the conditioning of the mind? That the words in the music is not being entrapped by the subconscious of those young people who dance for hours listening to this music? If so, I think you'd better rethink that position. For it is a form of mind control, brainwashing. Dr. Sargent notes that Chinese experiments in mass excitation, breaking down and reconditioning, are based on the same physiological principles as religious conversion, and also group and individual psychotherapy treatments. Folks, these include the application of tension, fear, anxiety, conflict, to the point where the subjects are uncertain. And in this state, suggestibility is increased and the old pattern of behavior is disrupted. The fact that the devotees of the mysteries were thoroughly conditioned to them and felt that they were important in their lives is seen in much historical evidence. Even in the 4th century of the Christian era, the Greeks were insisting that they, quote, would consider life unbearable if they were not allowed to celebrate those most sacred mysteries which unite the human race, unquote. Now, the work of those who have pointed out the function of the mysteries as mind training and conditioning has, of course, evoked no answer from those who still think that the rituals are mere symbolic representations of knowledge or facts. And indeed, they cannot admit this, simply because they would be admitting their own foolishness and stupidity in the process. So they will resist at all costs and continue to go to their meetings, for to do otherwise would be to confront their own fallibility. And in human nature, that is one of the most difficult things for any individual to do. We all realize that. It's interesting to note, folks, that the ecstasy which is produced by excitatory methods and is followed by manipulation of the mind is still sought by members of many secret cults who are aware of the scientific explanation. You see, irregardless, even when they know this, they still seek it out, because for them it fulfills some terrible need way down deep inside their gut. Their reaction is that the experience may well be induced by physical methods, but in spite of that, and this is what they say, quote, it is nothing less than actual spiritual communion with a supernatural power, unquote. This is the point at which scientists and mystics cannot agree. The mystic feels sure that he has experienced something sublime, and who's to say that they haven't? For if you have not experienced it, you have no basis upon which to make a decision. But to experience it is to put yourself in a position to be controlled by others. So we are in a quandary now. How do we explore this? The scientist tells the mystic that it is an illusion. He just simply will not believe it. The situation reminds one of the time when someone produced the soul of a departed relative to tell a spiritualist that there was no life after death. Although this is alleged to have happened in Ireland, one can visualize it taking place easily enough in the mutually heated atmosphere of scientists versus mystic anywhere in the world. The orgiastic side of the mysteries also has a place in the sphere of psychology. The catharsis, or the cleansing of the mind, which the secret cult of the Cathari experienced after ecstasy, is paralleled by the modern therapist's procedure in bringing his patient to a state of excitement and then collapse before implanting what he considers more suitable ideas in the mind. Christianity, of course, has not been behind in its use of the mystery system for initiates, for it was not until AD 692 that every believer was ordered to be admitted to the worship of the Christians, following the period when it was thought advisable to celebrate certain parts of worship in secret. You see, Christianity in the beginning was a secret society itself, and the correct name for it was the Friendly Open Secret Society, although in the beginning there was nothing open about it. Traces of this survive in such customs as that of the Greek Orthodox Church, where the priest celebrates divine worship behind a curtain, which is only taken away during the elevation of the host. Quote, since at that moment the worshippers prostrate themselves and are not supposed to see the holy sacrament. Unquote. The reason given for the secrecy of the practice of the Christian cult gives a clue in explaining that the celebrant must be prepared by expectation. St. Augustine laid down that secrecy was essential because the mysteries of Christianity were incomprehensible to human intellect and should not be derided by the uninitiated. Secondly, because this secret produced greater veneration for the rites. Thirdly, that the holy curiosity of those to be initiated into the experience of Christianity should be increased in order that they might attain to a perfect knowledge of the faith. And to tell you quite frankly, folks, in my study of mind control, the Christian church would swell well beyond any conception or imagination of what their numbers could be if they had continued their secrecy. Saint Basil, de Spiritu Sanctu, cap, let me see, that's the 17th. That's a writing, folks. Tells how the fathers of the church, quote, were well instructed to preserve the veneration of the mysteries in silence. For how could it be proper publicly to proclaim in writing the doctrine of those things which no unbaptized person may so much as look upon, unquote. Now this all sounds silly to us today. But believe me, folks, there is nothing silly about it. And if it were practiced today as it was then, the Christian church would be more powerful than you could possibly conceive. Now remember, this is the results of our research. I myself consider myself to be a Christian, and that I follow the teachings, the words of Christ in my daily life, not the dogma of any church, not the preaching of any minister or priest, but simply and only the words of Christ. Seated upon the foundation of that which God gave us early in our history, the moral code called the Ten Commandments, as they were originally given to Moses, and not as they were changed by man in the form of the Pope. The origin of mystery ceremonies seems to be India, or at least the place and time when the Brahmin priesthood started its initiations. The ceremonies were based upon the Hindu myths, but the procedure followed in training the aspirant is strikingly similar in Egypt, and Egypt profoundly influenced Greece. Now, what's left out here, and the reason it's usually left out, is because any mention or discussion of the Babylonian mysteries or the Babylonian religion is usually met with much criticism and derision by those who believe that it was a terrible institution. The mysteries definitely came from the East, and the East in the mysteries still survives today. When one Freemason greets another and he's not sure if he's really a Freemason, he'll ask him if he's a traveler or if